What is a health savings account and why it rocks this week on the Extreme Personal Finance Show? Hey everyone, welcome to episode 39 of the Extreme Personal Finance Show. My name is Chris, and joining me, my friend Dan. Dan, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well. I think it's been a hot minute since I was on. You've been going solo the last couple of weeks, I think, right? Or did I
Yeah.
or did I miss one that I was actually there for and I just blanked out?
Yeah, no, I think last week there was like a conflict or something, and so we did a different episode last week. But you're back. It's awesome. Good to have you back. Last night we got to hang out in person, IRL, like the kids say.
Is that
Um,
what they say?
I don't know. I think that's what the Gen Xers say. Um, oh, wait, by the way, I was watching I came across a podcast. There's like a podcast with these three women, and it's like a Gen X podcast. And I'm
All
telling
right.
you, like everything they talked about, like they were like focusing on like all the 80s things. And I don't know what it is about the 80s, man, but it was like, is it because I was that age during that time? But it was like so influential, not just to me, but pop culture and like TV and all the toys. And I don't know. It was kind of fun and cool, but
Yeah, 80s and 90s both good decades.
I think so. I think so.
I liked them better than 2000 to 2010 personally.
Yeah, right. I remember one time so I worked at a couple tech companies, and like one of the tech companies I remember, I was in like a training class or something, right? Doing this technical certification. I'm the oldest guy in this class, right? And I was probably 39 at the time or something, right? But I was the oldest guy. And somebody brought up something about the 80s. And I remember this one whippersnapper. He's like, I fucking hate the 80s. And I was
You're
like,
like,
what?
what's wrong with the 80s?
Dude, he was just so angry about the 80s. And I'm like,
It's
okay.
jealousy. That's all
I
it
know, I'm
is.
like, weird.
Green with envy.
I'm like, the 80s, there was so many great things that came out of the 80s. Do you remember the TV show Auto Man? Remember that show?
I don't remember Auto Man.
It's like this computer dude was able to like generate this holographic superhero.
My name is Ottoman. You must be Walter Neviker.
How did you know that?
It's on the programming you fed into my system. I must say, Walter, you're very good. Very good indeed. I look wonderful.
If you do say so yourself.
Well, you programmed me to be honest. But tell me, why did you call me Automan?
It means that you're the world's first truly automatic man. You can do anything because you're not real.
Oh, but I am. I'm as real as you are, just different. And thanks to you, perfect.
And it had a little like computer generated AI called Cursor, and Cursor could design and make anything. And it was very high tech for the time.
I'll have to look it up.
Yeah,
It's got to be out there somewhere.
Auto Man, look it up.
Auto Man.
It's absolutely corny and hilarious, but as a you know 9-year-old kid, it was pretty rad.
Yeah. Did he have an HSA?
That's right. Okay, let's look. So we're going to break down this week. This week we're going to talk about an HSA, so a health savings account. And I got to be honest, I had no idea what this was or that it was even a thing until I got my last job. So until I got my job in 2017, because I just never heard about it. I didn't really, I was very new to personal finance because I didn't really learn about finance stuff till like 2016 or so. And I got this job and I saw that an HSA was one of the benefits that the employer offered. And so I had to do some research. And so if we kind of break down what an HSA or a health savings account is, then we're going to go into some of the advantages, why some people like it, why some people don't, why sometimes, like you and I were talking about it yesterday, sometimes people are like over indexing on how awesome they are a little bit.
That's a way to put it for sure.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
so if we break it down, So an HSA is a tax advantaged savings account designed specifically for individuals that are enrolled in what's called a high deductible health plan. So if you have
Right.
your health insurance and you have a higher deductible, then it allows you to set aside pre-tax dollars into this plan that you can use for medical expenses. And so that's one of the kickers is like you do have to be covered by this higher deductible. So you are going to be paying a little bit more out of pocket, right, throughout the
Right.
year.
Well, potentially. I mean, because you're assuming you're fully healthy and you don't have to go
That's
to
right.
the hospital, then, it's still zero, other than the premium that you're paying every month. But
Right.
so potentially you're paying more, but it's going to depend a little bit on how healthy you are.
And I think that's the thing is if you are relatively healthy. So, and just to give it some context, so in 2025, a high deductible health plan says that deductible is at least $1,600 or 1,650 for a single, or $3,300 for family coverage. So that means you're going to be paying $3,300 until you satisfy that deductible. That could be a lot. And then and then because it's a high deductible plan, the total out of pocket could get pretty high as well. So like for individuals, the out of pocket max is like $8,300, and then for a family, it's up to $16,000.
Sure. Up to, of course,
Yep,
there's
up
going to be
to.
different health plans and different employers that cover
Correct, correct.
part of the premiums and whatnot.
So let's first focus on this is one of those things where I didn't know what this was. So I did some research and I was like, oh wow, like this seems like it might be a good opportunity to not only put money aside for healthcare expenses, but also there's an investment component there. So we're going to talk through some of the benefits and then we'll look at some of the negatives you could say. So one of the biggest things is that an HSA offers like a triple tax advantage for those accounts. One, the contributions that you make are tax deductible, right? So the contributions they reduce your taxable income because they're pre-tax. And then the growth, because they're in this investment component, it grows tax-free. And then when you actually take money out to pay for those healthcare expenses, the withdrawals are also tax-free. So those are the three pieces of where these are kind of like, tax advantaged. The contributions are pre-tax, the growth tax-free, and then the withdrawals are tax-free. So one of the things, like I mentioned, is that there is this investment component. Now you have to have a certain amount in there before you can start investing. That was one thing I learned the hard way. I'm like, why can't I do this?
Okay. Well,
You
yeah. Well,
know?
I mean, if the whole point is that you can use some of that money for your healthcare expenses, basically they want to make sure that should you need money for these healthcare expenses, there's something there.
Mhm.
Because, anytime that we put some money in investment, at least in the short to medium term, there's good risk that the market's going to be volatile and the cash that you need for whether this is a way you intend to use the account or not, it is a health savings account. So that, they just want to make sure that there's some cash on hand available that you can use for those medical expenses.
Sure, sure. That makes sense. That investment component, once your balance exceeds, that like 1,000 to 2,000 range or whatever, then you can invest the excess money that you contribute. But there is a cap, there is a max on what you can contribute overall for individuals this year for 2025. Individuals can actually contribute up to $4,300. And then for a family, you can contribute 8,550, so $8,550. And if you're over 55, they actually have catch-up contributions where you can add an extra $1,000, so up to $9,550. And again, because it's an employer benefit, it all depends on the employer. One of the things that I was doing is because mine was through my employer, every January, my employer would contribute money to that account as well as part of the benefit. So it was, again, kind of like free money, right? You're getting it
Yeah.
added to that account. So like we mentioned, once the balance exceeds over a certain threshold, typically like $1,000 or $2,000, then you can invest the excess into like mutual funds, ETFs, or other investment options. My particular account, I could choose, they had a list of mutual funds, or I could dump it into Betterment and I could have all of the options that Betterment also had. And this is one of the things that we had talked about, having a financial advisor, and if you are paying for assets under management, this is one of those scenarios where I had money growing in this account that my financial advisor was not managing, but I could take the list of my funds. So I took the list of my mutual funds and shared it with my financial advisor. He told me how to best allocate, which funds to choose, and what percentage, what my allocation is in each of these funds
Yeah.
for my kind of like, growth, aggressive growth, kind of my strategy, right? And to this day, so because I'm doing the article, I logged into my HSA account, and over the last year, my HSA had a 26% return. Not too bad.
No, not bad at all. Not bad at
Um,
all.
so anyway, so I was going to say that was one example of me using a financial advisor to really help me choose the appropriate funds that match up to my risk tolerance and the growth that I wanted, and all that stuff. It is something where you can use up to that the money that you contribute to pay for those healthcare expenses, and then you also can invest the excess. Dan, so what are your thoughts so far? So far we have this account, we can make those contributions. What are your thoughts so far?
You know, as far as just talking about what an HSA is, I think you've pretty much hit the nail on the head. It's you take comes off your income, so you're not paying the tax on it and the growth. Most of the things that I end up wanting to share, and I was thinking about this a little bit last night and then this morning when we talked about it yesterday. Um, I definitely came across very like, I think HSAs are terrible, and I didn't mean to come off that way.
Well, I don't
Um,
think that's I don't think that's
right,
what you meant. I just think
but I think a lot of the points that I'm going to end up making are more of the just, for lack of a better word, off the top of my head, cautionary. Like, hey,
mhm.
the HSAs are a great tool that you can use for certain things, but make sure you're aware of these other items.
If someone is new, like I was in 2017, not knowing what this is, you can use those funds that you contribute to pay for healthcare related expenses, including your doctor visits, your copays, hospital stays, prescriptions,
Yeah, lots of
vision and
stuff.
dental care. And if you choose to actually purchase stuff like long-term care insurance, you can actually pay for premiums with
Mhm.
your HSA funds as well.
Yep. Or you can not. You can just keep paying those things out of pocket
You
and let
certainly
those
can.
investments grow over time, which is one of the things that I think people really like about it is uh, maybe there's this sense of, well, I'm healthy now in my 30s, 40s, 50s, but as we get older, just because that's what happens,
Mhm.
we start to be a little less healthy. Not anything that we're doing wrong necessarily, just we get older, right? So they're like, let me pay out of pocket and save this money and invest it so that later I can utilize it. And then also people can end up getting, as of now, this is allowable. I don't know if this will ever change in the future, but you can take all those receipts of all those health expenses that you have that you paid out of pocket and file them away on a hard drive, on a cloud drive, wherever you want to put them. And in the future, you're like, oh, I want $1,000 to go on buy a flight. You submit your receipt. And 20 years later, reimburse yourself for that $1,000 of medical expenses and take that money out tax free. So there's cool things that you can do with it for sure. I don't think the other side of things gets talked about enough, especially
Right.
in circles where there's people who are very, very financially independent oriented or that sort of thing that I think are worth discussing when we get there. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that was one of the things when I started first discussing it with my financial advisor too. He was saying, if you are relatively healthy, if you can continue to pay for those medical expenses out of pocket and use this as an investment vehicle. And that's what I had done for the last, 5, 6 years. Um, And I will say, like, I still don't know how to, you mentioned that I have years of receipts.
There
And
you
so
go.
I don't know when or if I'm gonna, I don't know. I'm sure there's a process, but of submitting those.
Well, I mean, that's one of those things where, I mean, this is actually a good example of if you're not using the account in the way that you intend to, then are you getting the benefit out of it that is the whole point of why you're using it, right?
Right.
So,
I think one of the big things too is that blew me away when I first discovered an HSA because I had used an FSA at my previous employer,
yeah,
and it was always a pain in the ass because you never could estimate it properly, and you're scrambling at the end of the year.
use it or lose it, right?
I know, right?
Yeah.
Use it or lose it. And that was one thing that was really cool when I discovered that no. An HSA, it's yours and yours forever. Like you take it with you. And I was like, oh, that's cool. So I can use this when I'm old and moldy and wrinkly and like
Right.
need.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I think that's one of the things that I liked about this type of account or this type of plan.
Yeah.
Well, I am excited to talk through some of those downsides.
Yeah. Or I hesitate to call them downsides, just things to know about, right? Because
Yeah.
it's one thing would be there's actually the potential for we talked about the triple tax advantage. There's potential for even the quadruple tax advantage, and then
Hmm.
that's the fact that if your contributions are going into it through a payroll deduction, so unlike 401k contributions, uh, HSA contributions don't count towards your FICA. So you don't pay
Oh,
those taxes. So on the one hand, that's another 7.65% of your income that's not going out, right?
interesting.
However, since it's not being subject to FICA, potentially, depending on what your income level is, if you're making a whole lot of money, then this wouldn't factor in. But for many people, that's going to lower your income as far as what's looked at for your Social Security benefit. Probably not a huge amount, nothing that's like, oh no, I'm getting half. It's not going to be anything that major. But if when Social Security looks at here were your earnings records, here's your 35 years of earning records that we're looking at, they're going to be lower by however much that you put in all those years to your HSA. So it is going to affect it. Maybe not in a way that is worth worrying about, but it's something to be aware of, right? If you're factoring that into your financial plan and think about Social Security and how that's going to have an impact on your retirement plans, right? So
No,
so
that's cool.
that's one to be aware of. I think another one does come up when you talk with people who have kids, maybe even grandkids, and they're thinking about how can how can I have a legacy? How can I leave something for my children, right, or my grandchildren, or whatever it is that they want to do. Um, HSAs, when you pass, if your HSA beneficiary is your spouse, it just, okay, now it's their HSA, no big deal. It's same. But if your beneficiary is a non-spouse, then that is no longer a health savings account. It liquidates from the account and is 100% ordinary income taxed to whoever the beneficiary was. So if easy math, it was $100,000 HSA. They're in an effective 30% just for just for easy math. Then that's 30 grand out the door because it's taxable income, and that's federal, right? So then you add in state and potentially local, and so it can have a large impact. So again, maybe not so much to where what you're using the account for, it's fine, but I think that would catch a lot of people by surprise
Oh,
where
yeah,
they're
totally.
like, oh,
Yeah, when you told me that, I had no idea. So there's no way, it's not like some of those other accounts that may be some sort of, like you're not taxed because of inheritance, right? Or rollover or like inherited IRA. That
right,
doesn't
where there's
exist.
there's different It's gotten more and more complicated, I feel like, over the last couple of years. But yeah, with Roth IRAs, traditional IRAs, there's different 10-year time limits where you have to withdraw the funds and different strategies to figure out the most advantage ways. But you can do that over time. And if it's a Roth, obviously you can pull that out tax-free. If it's a taxable brokerage account, then that you inherit with a step up in basis. So if you inherit just say $1 million account, well, you could, I don't think you probably should, but you could liquidate that $1 million account and not owe any taxes because that's what you inherited it at. So there's other benefits, and you should have to think about what are my long-term goals and how do all of these different tools fit into them and to make it work. And to the point I said earlier, it's just I think when people say, "Oh yeah, HSAs are great, everyone should have one," it's like, well, okay, for two things here. One, if it meets your goals and it meets what you're going to use it for, sure. Okay, I like three things. If it fits your personality and what you're comfortable with. Some people may want to pay that a little bit more in premium and have a lower deductible because it helps them sleep better at night.
Yeah,
They don't have
totally.
to worry about that. And so they have a more enjoyable life because it's not something that they're worried about, right? And then three being that it's 100% possible, and I probably shouldn't say it that way. It's very, very possible if you're doing the right things that you can meet your goals without an HSA.
Mhm.
And I feel like sometimes the way that a lot of talking heads, a lot of podcasts, a lot of people like us will start talking about these things, we make it sound so critical that some people may think, oh, well, I don't have access to an HSA.
Right.
Am I going to be able to do all the things I need to do for a HSA? Yeah, yeah, there are other things out there. So I just think sometimes we make it seem like it's if you're not contributing to an HSA, how dare you even
Right.
be doing anything else?
Yeah, I think like in my situation, it was one where, I had gotten bitten by like the financial independence bug. I was really kind of going through my finances, and so I was being very, very frugal, stripping all my variable expenses, living frugally. I was maxing out all my other like tax advantaged accounts, that were offered by my employer. And so the next thing I could do was contribute to the HSA because it was pre-tax. I was looking for anything that I could do that could lower my lower my earned income and also contribute to something that was tax advantaged. And then anything after that, I would just dump into my brokerage account.
Yeah, which are also tax advantage. I don't think that gets enough love
Hmm.
because they have long-term capital gains. It's a different tax bracket than ordinary income, so it's tax
That's
advantage.
that's an interesting way to look at it. Okay.
Just saying.
No,
But that's
I,
off
I
topic. That's a
I
topic
never,
for
yeah,
another
I
day.
never thought of it that way, but yes, I would put my after tax money into that brokerage account.
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting.
So HSAs, they're a great tool. I just anytime there's something that can make people afraid that they won't meet their goals, I just want to combat against that and be like,
Sure.
no, we can figure this out. And if an HSA is not available to you or you're not comfortable with it, that doesn't mean that you can't be successful financially.
Right. If you're new to this, understand too that it isn't the best choice for everyone, right? If you have higher healthcare needs, for example, like choose a more effective healthcare plan with higher premiums and lower deductible. Like I get that. So it's not the right vehicle for everyone. Another thing too, people, your contributions aren't as much as other vehicles like IRAs and 401ks, right? So the contributions are relatively low.
It sounds like it's a little bit higher than IRAs are. If they went
Um,
up to 85, IRAs didn't go up this year, if
it,
at
it
all.
is, let's see, contribution limits of the HSA was 85.50 for family.
So okay, I guess it's different. I got clued in on the 85/50, not on the fact that it was for family. So sure,
Yep.
if you're married couple individually, both together would be more than 85/50.
Sure.
Yeah, you're right.
In the end, Dan, I think that, an HSA offers some flexibility, some benefits that combines like savings account to help with healthcare expenses with an investment account. It is tax advantaged. It can fit, but again, I one of those things where certainly work with financial counselor, financial advisor, a planner to really kind of see, is this kind of triple tax benefit investment potential of an HSA? Will that work for you? Look at your family and your healthcare needs. And if you have higher healthcare needs, maybe this isn't right for you. So any last words of wisdom that you want to share with our listeners?
Yes, I had some conversations earlier today that happens very often where I think we try to overcomplicate things, right?
We often do. Yes.
we take something that can be really easy and complicate it and make it harder than it has to be, all with the idea of maximization and over optimization. Well, okay, optimization, but that can turn into over optimization, right? So I think keeping in mind, so you mentioned that you didn't even know what an HSA was till 2017, right?
Correct.
So that being said, and I know in a lot of ways it feels like a long time, but they didn't even come around till 2003. So it's
Oh,
not
okay.
like generations and generations knew what HSAs were, and you were just behind the curve, right? And as far as investment vehicles go and whatnot, believe it or not, 15 years really isn't that long, because it's going to go through legislation and then it's going to get rolled out. And then 5 years later, people are like, okay, is this tool sticking around? What are we doing? So, give yourself a little bit of grace there. And where I'm going with that is there's so much things out there, so many things out there that you can do. And if you're feeling overwhelmed by how complex it is, then for the time being, just keep it simple. Give yourself the time to learn what the other things are. But, I've mentioned it several times on the podcast when you asked me for words of wisdom at the end. It's just like, keep it simple, save, invest, control your expenses, and give yourself the time to learn about these other things. Don't feel like you've got to make it super complicated right from the get-go.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan. It's always fun to hang. I appreciate it. And I learned some stuff, definitely some of those things. Like I had no idea that if I were to pass and pass along my HSA to my kids, how that behaves, right? And you're going to be hit with that tax burden, right? Pretty cool. I always learn stuff talking to you, man. So I want to thank everyone else for listening along with us. I really appreciate you listening. Appreciate you following us. Again, make sure you like, subscribe, share wherever you get your podcast. Please leave a review. We really do appreciate it. Subscribe on YouTube as well. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next time on the Extreme Personal Finance Show.